Well, hello. Welcome to the Black Men Speak podcast. It's a podcast that highlights ordinary Black men doing extraordinary things. And I'm your host, Keith Dent. I know it's been a while. I think it's been about a month since I've been on, but to me, it's about quality, not necessarily quantity. And our guest today definitely is quality. But before we get into that, as you know, this Wednesday, the movie Air is going to be coming out. Air Courting a Legend. It was about Nike kind of striking a business deal with upstart Michael Jordan. And the thing is about that one move vaulted Nike into one of the largest recognizable brands in the world today, but it also ultimately changed the sneaker game and celebrity endorsements as well. Now, in this $10 billion industry, there is one thing that is often overlooked, and that's the manufacturing side of it. Um, some of the things as I was researching for our guest today, by the time a sneaker really gets to the market and sold, it takes about 8 to 12 months for that to happen. And our guest today is going to really change that. He has an innovative way that reduce that time to 1 to 3 months. And so, the sky is the limit. And so his name is Omar Bailey. He's a co-founder of FCTRY Lab, and it's a high-tech no, I'm sorry, it's located in LA, and it's a high-tech sneaker creation lab that he's worked with entertainers, sports people, businessmen, and he's going to build brands through footwear. Now, Omar has built his reputation on working with stars such as Jay-Z, Karim Benzema, Terry Crews, Questlove, who I love, by the way, Allan Houston, and he's been at some top tier brands like Adidas, Supreme, and Timberland, just to name a few. Now, from February 2019 to 2022, Omar was head of the innovation lab at Yeezy-Adidas. He was helping to bridge the gap between cutting edge conceptual designs and physically wearable footwear. And if anyone has seen Yeezys, and when I first saw them, I was wondering, being an older guy, I was like, who is going to wear these things? But you see them all over, and he was very instrumental in that. Omar studied industrial design at the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, and he graduated from the College of Design of Architecture and Art at the University of Cincinnati. A shout out to my dad. I know he'll be excited to hear that because he's everything Cincy. So we'll bring him up. Omar, welcome to the show, sir.
What's up? What's up, Keith? How you doing? Happy Sunday.
Thank you. It's a Palm Sunday to you at that. So, um, how's it doing? I want to just start here and then we'll go back a little bit. I read that, FCTRY Lab is really, and your hope is to democratize a sneaker production. So
Right.
what does that actually mean?
Yeah. So to democratize footwear means that the in the process of developing a shoe, whether it's a sneaker or a shoe or whatnot, and bringing that to market, especially if you're looking to be very creative and to push the boundary on the design and the concept itself, right, requires you know in the past requires you to physically be in the factory, and knowing that we don't have any shoe factories in the United States, and the best place to go to when you're producing shoes at scale, first option is Asia, so that's China or Vietnam, Taiwan. It's not convenient, as you can imagine, for everybody to go and do that, right? So if you're a big company, it's a lot easier, but if you're starting a brand, or you're a smaller brand, it's very difficult, which is why you don't really see new companies or new shoe companies sort of really starting up that often. It's difficult. So what Factory Lab, the way we've democratized that, not necessarily democratized the production, but we democratized the development, the heavy lift. So if you, Keith, wanted to start sort of the Keith like brand of shoes, you would have to get on a plane, go to Asia, sit in a factory. You'd have to know what factory to go to, right? There's all these steps
Mm,
that have to happen. It's a hard thing to do, and to know if you don't come from this space. With us, we do all that heavy lifting domestically here in Los Angeles, and that allows you to really push forward, push the boundaries on creation, and really doing things that are different. There's a reason why when you go to a retail store, pick anyone, Journeys, DSW, whatever, and you
mm.
look at brands and you see across the board, or at least like a good majority of them, where a lot of the shoes look the same, right? And that's not by accident. The reason why that happens is because you have, everyone is kind of knocking off each other or using the same inspiration, right? Like no one's really truly like pushing the boundaries, on creation. From time to time you see stuff, but you really just kind of see like the same old thing like over and over and over again, just a slightly different version of it. So yeah, so to answer your question, democratizing means that we're doing it here locally in the States from a development standpoint, which gives you more control over the creation process, therefore allows you to come up with really more interesting designs and concepts that you could bring to real life. Then you use those concepts to inform the factory on how to scale those products and take it to market. At the end of the day, a factory just wants to produce. That's the only thing they want to do. They don't want to figure out for you, Keith, like what your concept is that you want to do. If you can come with them with an already cooked idea or with the answers to the test, to kind of put simply, it's easier for them to take that and produce it exactly the way that you set it up, as opposed to leaning into them to try and figure it out for you. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll definitely I have a question around that, but we'll save that. But I really wanted to know, how did you get into the sneaker game or the shoe space in the first place?
Oh man, yeah, this goes back. Man, I started drawing sneakers when I was 7, 8 years old. In the early '90s, if you remember, speaking of Air Jordans and Nikes, when you were talking about in your monologue, there was a lot of crime and violence around those shoes when they first launched in the market.
Mm,
There was
right.
a massive
Absolutely.
frenzy. If you remember, Sports Illustrated had the cover with the gun and the Air Jordans on it, and it was like your life or your shoes. And that was a really crazy time. I feel like that doesn't really get talked about either that much. That was wild. Like when you really reflect back on that moment in time, and that scared the hell out of my parents. My parents are from both of my parents are from Jamaica, from the islands. They moved to this country, like everyone else from the Caribbean or others, coming from other countries here for opportunity, to try and create better opportunity for themselves and their families. So like my mom and dad were like, well, like if you're gonna get hurt if we buy you these shoes, then we're not gonna buy them for you. So as a result, I just started sketching them and drawing them. I realized if I couldn't have them in physical form, then having them in 2D form on paper was
Right.
satisfactory enough for me. That was really kind of how like the passion started for it. And then one thing led to another. I was born in New York, born in the Bronx, and then we relocated to Florida when I was 10. My parents put me in an art school, and very quickly I was coined with the name, the sneaker guy. I was the dude that was always drawing shoes in the back of the classroom. Even till this day, like I get messages from just old random classmates. Say, man, I remember you were just drawing sneakers all day, and we thought you were crazy. I guess the joke's on us now, like kind of stuff. And that's what I did. And this was before the internet, before Google or Yahoo or Facebook or any of that stuff. And even at that time it was like Google. It was no it was sorry it was a dial-up internet, right? I remember we got our first computer, like it
Oh
was
yeah.
a Packard Bell computer, and you
Okay. You love you love that noise.
yeah, you're signing to get online, and then like, you go make a sandwich and get something to drink and eat, and then come back, and you still got like 5 more minutes before you get online. And like, it wasn't a thing. So like there wasn't a lot of reference points that I had for like, how do you become a shoe designer? My parents didn't know. My mom was working 2 jobs, my dad was working 2 jobs, and like, and they were just trying to provide and keep a roof over our head. So the last thing they're thinking about is, how are we gonna, like, what direction do we point them in to draw shoes? So my reference point was East Bay magazine, if you remember East Bay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get that all the time. I could never afford anything in it, but I would always look at it. And that was my reference point. I still have so many of my drawings from a child, and if you look at them, they all look like East Bay ads. It's like the shoe, and then it was like I would come up with the name, I'd make up a price, I'd make up the weight of the shoe. I had no idea what any of this stuff was, but that was the reference that I had, and that was it. So like, as far as I was concerned, the way you become a shoe designer was you get a job at Foot Locker, right? And like, but which is obviously, that is not how you get a job designing shoes. But like, I think that just speaks to how little information that we have about these types of professions, specifically in the in the Black and Caribbean communities, right? Like, you want to become a doctor or a lawyer or a designer or whatever, and we don't necessarily have that representation in our communities to be able to lean into, to understand how you do that. So for me, I got into the space, I like to say I was in the right place at the right time more than once. As I mentioned, I went to art school. My teachers really believed in me, and one magical day when I was a junior in high school, a school from Detroit, Michigan, came on a recruiting trip, and they had this program called industrial design. I had no idea what it was called. And they showed their student portfolio and showed their work off. And as they do when they go to different schools to recruit kids, they're showing like, oh, how cool they are and the stuff that students do. And there was a shoe in there. It was a Reebok shoe. I'll never forget it. And it caught my attention. And, I remember my teachers saying that this place is meant for you. I've never been to Detroit, Michigan. It was the first time in my life that I had become interested in college, because before that, I just thought like, okay, what am I going to do? I didn't have great grades. I wasn't going to, be some rocket scientist or anything like that. So I was trying to figure out what was in the cards for me, what was my future going to be like. So they encouraged me and helped me develop my portfolio, improve my grades. I went to summer school. That summer, I took the classes that I needed to take to get my grades back up. I think I was below like a 2.0 GPA. So like, I'm telling you, when I said I was like a horrible student, I was not made great. I wasn't a bad kid. I just wasn't interested in
school.
In like the academic stuff. My art classes, I crushed it. Like, I would bring my report card home and it was A's in anything creative. Like I would kill it. It was the other stuff that like I wasn't that interested in. And then all of a sudden, when this school presented itself, I was like, wow, like this is where I need to go. And I focused and I locked in. And it was really the first time that I can recall in my life where like I made a decision that I wanted to actually like do something and was able to accomplish it. And, I spent the next year and a half improving my grades. I was going to summer school, taking night classes when the regular school year started. I didn't get that free 7th-hour period that most seniors get when they have one foot out the door of high school. Like I was taking like I was making up a freshman class that I failed, when I was a senior, which, was a little embarrassing as a senior to be in there, but I did what I had to do. And I was able to get my GPA back up to that 2.0 to be able to walk across that stage. And I applied into that school and I got in. And, which was incredible for me. And, I packed up my bags, at the end of the fall following me graduating from high school, and moved to Detroit, Michigan, sight unseen. So long-winded answer, but that's kind of how this whole thing started
Yeah.
and how I
Right.
got into it. And I got
And the rest is history so far. That's great. That's
yeah.
fantastic. And but it one thing I like about it is that one, you saw you were able to find what you're passionate about. That's one. And then two, you there was someone that was in your corner to get you to where you wanted to go, at least initially. And so for any kids, or even adults that are watching, it is vital and it's important, to follow your passion. And then
Yep.
also there is that person in your corner that can get you there. So
Hmm.
now you mentioned the fact that there was no really shoe manufacturing companies in the US, which I find fascinating, by the way, just because we have so many people that could use jobs. But I know you were overseas working, I think India, in a manufacturing um,
Yep.
scenario.
Hmm.
So, what is something about the manufacturing business overseas, especially for shoes, that we as Americans don't really understand?
Good question. The first thing that comes to mind is that it's hard. Making shoes is hard and they don't just fall out of the sky, right? There's a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of infrastructure, that's involved in it. And the design is very important, very, very important, but it literally is just the tip of the iceberg. I started traveling abroad and really spending time in factories very early on in my career in like '05, '06. And that's when I got kind of the first whiff of what this industry is like. I realized very quickly that, oh, I'm not the man because I can just like sketch a shoe on a piece of paper. You realize there's all these other steps, that happen. And I'm not just talking about the production either. I'm talking about the logistics, the commercialization, the vendor relationships, the factory
Mm,
relationships, right? Like not every factory can make every style of shoe, right? Not a factory that makes women's heels can't make basketball shoes, and a factory that makes basketball shoes can't make football cleats, right? And kind of the list goes on and on. So like for me, I got to learn very quickly the lay of the land, how this supply chain works on a global level. And you learn very quickly that like, in Asia, there's, specific specialties there versus going to South America or even going to, parts of Europe or South Korea or Taiwan, right? And like
mm,
and I was very fortunate enough to build relationships in all these different markets. Like I really was on the ground level, in the factory level, really kind of understanding this from A to Z. So I consider myself more of a product engineer or a footwear sort of engineer, but
mhm,
who has a foundation as a designer. And I take a lot of pride in that because I put the time in and put the work in. So India was an incredible experience for me right before, my previous role before starting Factory Lab. I spent about 3 years in New Delhi, and I was running part of a factory for developing and creating new shoe concepts that we were putting out into the market, specifically in Asia and the Gulf markets. This specific brand, the brand was Lotto, the Italian sportswear brand. They're
mhm,
actually extremely popular in India, believe it or not. And the company that I was working with owned the license for them, and they were completely vertically integrated, meaning that not only did they own their own factories, but they also owned their own retail channel. So they controlled the distribution from A to Z. Everything was funneled through their company. So if we created something, we would put it out in the market into the stores that like we basically owned or that the company owned. So I had full autonomy over doing that. So it's excuse me, it's making footwear, like I said, is hard. Um, it's not something that we can, I think, easily do here in the United States from a production standpoint. I believe that there are certain methods of production and methods of making. What I mean by that is you have specific categories of types of footwear, whether it's cut and sew or
Hmm.
injection molded or knit or vulcanized, right? These are all individual processes that kind of live in buckets on how a shoe can be made to
Right.
achieve a specific aesthetic. And there's probably one or two of them that realistically we can do in the United States. The others are much more difficult and require just way more infrastructure, way more not only labor, but labor with very specific skill sets. So I
Hmm.
think it's
Hmm.
possible. I think we can get there one day. I think we just have to be honest with ourselves and look in the mirror and be like, okay, what can we realistically do in this space and focus on that instead of just trying to do everything. And not saying that that's what people are doing, but I think that's the lens that it has to be looked at if democratizing manufacturing and footwear is ever going to happen realistically.
Right. So you in your bio, you had mentioned that you would be probably be able to cut production or manufacturing about 75%. So one, why does it take so long? Why does it take like 8 to 12 months for a shoe to be actually get to the market? And what is it about your company that's able to reduce that amount?
Yeah, good. Two great questions. I'll start by using an analogy. Big companies, like the big sneaker companies that we're all familiar with, they're like, they're like cruise ships, right? It takes, for a cruise ship to make a left turn or to make a right turn takes a really long time, right? Like you
Right,
just
right.
can't like flip it around, like a speedboat. Like it needs to move at grace, needs to move slow because, if it goes too fast or it hits the dock or something, it could be catastrophic. It's the same way these big companies are, right? There's a lot of moving parts on the inside, and it just takes a long time to get these products to market. Like it's a 12 to 18 month
Hmm.
cycle, that a lot of them are working on, where they're planning out, when they're like right now, like brands are probably working on fall 24, maybe even winter, like or spring summer 25, right? Is like
Hmm.
what how far out some of these brands are thinking. Now, the way that we've sped that process up is through the development. Production is production. At the end of the day, it's going to take the time that it needs to produce. But what we can do here in LA in our lab is speed up the development stage and process. So again, kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, when you have a new idea and you want to do something very radical, very different, right? There's a couple of shoes that I have, over my shoulder, like, this thing, right? The Easy Knit Runner boot. When you look at this thing, it's like, what the hell is this? This is wild. Like, how it doesn't have laces, it's got this weird toe shaped thing, the bottom is
Yeah.
crazy, all this stuff. And in order to be able to come up with something like this, you need time, and you need the ability to be able to innovate and iterate. Failing fast when you're creating a product is just as important as coming up with solutions, for the problems that you're trying to solve. The faster you know what is real or what you can accomplish versus what you can't is how you're going to end up coming up with something that you're
Mm.
going to be able to get to market quicker, right? So that's what the lab that we have represents. And that's how we impact the speed to market. It's not necessarily the end production result.
Right,
It's
right.
more about being able to develop something like this that can then be handed off to the factory and say, you see this strap right here? Like, this is exactly what I want. This is how this part is going to be attached to this piece. This is the way this sole is going to look here, right? Like it's about the information that is passed on to the manufacturer, because what you're
Okay.
doing now is you're setting the factory up to succeed, because they're going to make a lot less mistakes, maybe none at all, because they receive the information from you to do that. So that's how we impact the bottom line, is by getting a great start from the finish line. The same way, Usain Bolt gets that great jump off the starting line, on a 100-meter dash, right? It's the same
Okay.
thing with us. Like, if we could get a good jump off that starting line and get that product to the finish line, we've been able to set our factory up successfully, and that's
Oh,
how we're
okay.
able to move a lot faster.
So so I guess what I'm hearing is that you're able to do design and kind of create the prototypes and test them before they get to the factory, and that's what helps to speed up the production. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha. That's fascinating. And so then with that said, it also sounds like you also have the ability to um or opportunity to create more one of a kind sneakers
Yeah.
because of that fact too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That really allows, I have a saying, and it's, true innovation starts at the factory level. And what I mean by that is, you can sketch and draw sneakers or a product, anything, right? Like all day. Say, oh, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to create, and it looks great, and you create this beautiful rendering, and that's amazing. But the truth is you don't really know what you can do until you know what you can do. And what I mean by that is, once you get your hands on materials and you start really playing around with the construction of something and how it's going to be built, commercialization is very important. What I mean when I say commercialization, that's how you take a prototype and you create it into a commercial product that can be worn by the masses, right? There's very specific things that have to happen in that process, whether it's how you're assembling the sole to the upper, and what kind of glue or cement that you're using, or how it's being attached, right? Like how certain parts of the shoe are being stitched, the way the insole is coming together. All these different
Mm,
things impact the commercialization of the shoe and how it's going to fit, around your foot. So it's very important. It's critical, actually, when you're going from a prototype, to commercializing a shoe. So these are just really, really important details and things that that you have to keep in mind, and also allows us to be as kind of nimble as we are and as flexible as we are with our space here in LA.
and that's interesting because I guess a designer wouldn't necessarily know all of these details. They draw something, they think it looks cool, but then they have to test it out. So
Bingo.
yeah, so let's say I'm a hot designer and I've heard about the factory lab, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go out to LA and I'm going to show my sketch. And I know, Omar, it's going to change the industry. So I get to the doors. What would be the next steps to get that shoe to the market?
To
And
get
kind of
your
a quick version. So I know it's probably lengthy, but
Yeah,
what
yeah.
what would
No
be
worries.
some of those things that you would actually, we you of course invite me in, and then what would be next after that?
Understanding what the concept is that you want. Listen, I'm used to working with my previous employer, Mr. West. And I was used to developing a shoe based on very little information, right? So whether it's a blob sketch on a napkin with some coffee stains on it, or this beautiful like tech drawing that like spells out and calls out every little detail and every measurement and highlights everything, um I can work with either, right? So like,
Mhm.
it's just it's yeah, it's so for me it's really about the information that I receive in the beginning, and then that's where my imagination can start to run, and then we can really start thinking about, okay, what are the steps that we're going to take in building it. I won't have the answers until I just kind of get it in front of me, and
Okay.
know, right, like what to do. And I've worked on so many different projects, like I'm immediately going into the archive in my brain. It's like, okay, I built something that was like kind of like this, or I did this one construction 8 years ago that could be interesting to do for this, or I wonder if I
Mm,
combined this thing from 8 years ago with this thing from 6 years ago and put it together. And it's like, oh, that's not quite the answer, but like it leads you down the path where you do find the answer, right? So to answer your question, like the way that we collaborate with creators, whether they're entertainers or brands or emerging designers, starts there, right? Some are going to come with very like spelled out, very clear instructions on what they want, and others are not, and the others are going to fall somewhere in the middle, and that's fine. It's my process, or the process of Factory Lab, where we step in to pick up those pieces wherever they lay or wherever they fall, to continue that path forward to eventually create something that hopefully is very unique and very different, and that meets the that meets the requirements of the person that we're working with.
Right. Okay. And was there, and I'm thank you for that, but was there one design that you thought really was going to really land, but didn't? And what were some of the reasons why it didn't land like you thought?
In general, just like anything that I've worked on.
Yeah, just in general. Yeah, it could have been one thing that you were really like, this is the one.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Something that I worked on that maybe didn't quite land or hit the way that I thought it was going to hit. One thing that comes to mind, there was a brand that I was involved in, that me and my old partner created. Shout out to Barry Katz. It was a brand called Ectio. It was a performance footwear brand that was created to prevent or reduce the amount of ankle sprains that would happen in basketball.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, very interesting. You can look it up. EKTIO, Ectio basketball. We both created this technology. I'm on the patent for as a utility function that we created for it. We basically took, if you're familiar with athletes getting tape jobs or
Yeah,
getting
all the
tape
time.
on their ankle,
Yep.
right? We took a classic figure eight tape construction and we converted it into an actual strap system that is built into a basketball shoe. And we spent almost 3 years developing that shoe. We spent a ton of money. This was early years for me. This was like 2007, 2008, 2009, that we were developing this shoe. We went to China like a bunch of times. They brought me on board because they knew I had those relationships, I had those connections to do that. And the technology worked. We worked with the Hospital for Special Surgeries in New York City, with some of their top, like, their biomechanic scientists, and just these people that were like way, way smarter than me. And we did all these different robotic tests and different things to prove the theory that we were trying to set out, which was that, this technology can help reduce ankle sprains by a significant amount, which is a big problem
Yeah,
for
that would have been a
athletes
game changer for
in
especially
general.
basketball players. Yeah.
Yeah, so we put the shoe out on the market, and we got a lot of there was a lot of interest in it. Like if you look it up, you'll see there was, we sold a lot of shoes. We did a lot. Like, we were marketing with ESPN. We had John Starks and Rick Barry as spokespeople for the brand. We were meeting and talking with everybody. But I don't think the reason why it didn't like land in a big way had anything to do with the design per se. I think it was timing, and I think it was the space that we were in. Basketball is extremely competitive,
Mm,
and and I mean, basically, like, Nike owns that space, right?
right.
Like, I mean,
Right.
Nike basically owns the term basketball. And so it wasn't even like we started and our goal was like, we're going to compete with Nike and create the next Nike. It'd be foolish to think of that. It was more like you were competing for eyeballs, attention, and loyalty of Nike customers. I literally can remember I know you're in New Jersey. I remember we were in Jersey, and we were at a high school, and we were doing like a sort of like a wear test, kind of
Yeah.
like we had an opportunity to go to this high school basketball team and show them our shoe, and we explained everything and the technology and how it works, and everything. And some kids, and this is when it just really hit me, and I realized it, like the vast majority of the kids refused to put the shoe on. They just did not want to take their Nikes off, even though like our shoe was fundamentally better. I mean,
Wow.
I remember specifically there was one kid who rolled his ankle like 5 times in this one shoe, and he did not want to take them off and didn't want to put them on. And that's when I was like, it's the loyalty. That's the reason why Nike pays millions of dollars for "I want to be like Mike" commercials, and this commercial and that commercial and this ad and that ad, is because from a very early age, you're being cultivated as a loyal consumer. And it wasn't it I remember it being, it was never more clear to me ever as it was then in that moment, that wow, like this is going to be a lot harder than I thought, because we have a product that we know that works. We just spent hundreds of $1,000s proving that, and we're not going to be able to get the kid that like we think that we can get, because they just want to keep looking cool in their Nikes, which is fine. So we pivoted and we shifted and started focusing a little bit more on like the weekend warrior type, right? Like the person who has a job, who has a family, who wants to play basketball and do something active on the weekends, but doesn't want to hurt themselves so they can't
Right.
go to work on Monday, or whatnot. So we shifted, and we had a lot of success overseas. I remember in Israel and the UK, Australia, like we sold a lot of shoes there, but it was very, very difficult to
Very hard.
penetrate the US market, and for that reason.
I mean, if you had sneakers that would prevent hamstrings, I would have bought them. you know.
But it was a
Um,
great technology. It worked.
it
You
sounds
know,
interesting.
I
Yeah. I mean, I
feel like it definitely could have worked, and we maybe you might see it in a different way, in a different form
right.
in the future. You never know. We may bring it back, but yeah, to answer your question, that was something that like didn't land the way that we thought it would. but
Right.
but I think it was, like I said, I think it was more about just the timing and the market, as opposed to just like the way the shoe looked.
Okay. Well, yeah, and that's a great, thank you for telling me that story. That is fascinating and just does talk about the power of branding and things of that
This is
nature.
water, by the way,
Yeah,
for anyone
yeah.
watching. It just looks like a flask. It is
yeah.
water.
So that I want to kind of move forward to your business as a whole, because just in doing, looking at your website and the type of business that you have, I see like a lot of different pathways that could actually change the game of the shoe industry. So I don't know if you see that, and if you do, what portion of that really excites you the most?
About what we can
What you're
change in the industry.
Yeah, about what you'll be doing, because there is a couple where you could have, let's say, you could bring in just those hotshot designers that just may not get that opportunity,
Right.
and they can create just such innovative things, or just the actual design process being so much faster. And then, so what part of that really excites you?
There's a few things. I think one, from an operations standpoint, being able to push the boundary on design and creation. Our first shoe, I'll show it, our the Night Runner that we dropped, very different, unlike anything that people have seen, at least very recently, but very different, right? So I'm excited about being able to do things like this, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily like this specific style or the way this looks right now, but the fact that we can even execute something different at this level. That's one thing that excites me about the future. I think another thing that excites me about the future is the way that we are planning to work with creators going forward. We want to be able to help creators build their brands through footwear. Footwear has been notoriously, kind of gate for a long time,
Mm.
by the big brands. It's been You know, and maybe not necessarily knowingly, just kind of based on like how many moving parts there are to getting in the space, right? You need to have, you know, you need to be in the industry, you need to have overseas connections, you need to have the right connections, you need to know how to develop and design, or at least bring the right people in. There's a lot of things that you need, you know, to be able to you know, to be able to get into this space, you know, and it's been, and for that reason, it's been a difficult industry for new companies to break into. You see t-shirt companies starting all the time. You even see, you know, tequila brands like starting
Mm,
left and right? Like that stuff is, at least from the outside looking in, I have no idea how it is to start any of those things, but compared to footwear, it feels like it's very much plug and play. But for footwear, that has been a Da Vinci code that has yet to have been cracked yet. And it's the brands that know, you know, that have mastered that for so long. So you know, to go back to your question about, you know, the other thing that excites me, and that's working with creators to help them build their brands, you know, through footwear in a way that they wouldn't have been able to before, because maybe they're not a big enough celebrity to like sign a contract with a big brand. You know, I think from an economic standpoint too as well, you know, we want to look at this very differently, as you know, as opposed to, you know, working with a brand. When, you know, a big star celebrity works with a brand, you know, they probably get paid some sum of money, you know, up front. A handful of them, and I mean a handful, less than five, like get an actual percentage of profits that the company makes. So we want to be able to flip the script on that and set up more joint venture type of business structures where we can work with these individuals and actually give them a significant, or like their like a real cut of the pie, you know, in this. You know, we bring to the table our expertise and the engine, that being Factory Lab, and helping them build these products and take them to market and be able to do it at scale through like a proper launch strategy, whether that's through drops or retail or whatever,
right,
you know,
right.
whatever it is that we figure it out. But just by having that opportunity for them to do it is very different than what some of these guys have been offered in the past. And we're not even looking for like, you know, these big mega stars, you know, to work with. I know I've worked with a lot of some of them in the past, but that's not even necessarily what we're looking for right now. You know, people who are kind of on the rise, where we can, you know, where we can both lean into each other and we can both be sort of help each other build something great, is what I'm more interested in. So yeah, so to answer your question, you know, I'm excited about the innovation that we're doing, and how we're going to continue to push the boundaries, you know, on design in an aesthetically pleasing way, and in a very different way. And then also the way that we plan on sort of changing the economic structure of how stars, entertainers, and influencers work with brands.
Yeah, I mean, and that really will change the game, especially for designers of color who, just someone like, let's say yourself, who 21 years ago or somewhere in there, you know, had these designs, you know, designed their own, but just had no way of getting it to market. And now they have that opportunity because they can come to someone like you and say, "Hey, look, this is a sketch that I have. How can we make this become reality?" So I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we want to get to, you know, helping those who don't have audiences, who appear to be, or who are very talented, and that we can use we can leverage our audience, which we're still building, you know,
Right.
every day, but we can leverage our audience to help them grow. We're not there yet. So in turn, you know, we're working with individuals who have the audience, who's missing the piece that we need, that they're missing the piece that they're looking for to kind of help sort of take that step. So, you know, right now we're mostly focused on like established or semi-established brands, entertainers, whether it's
Hmm.
rappers, musicians, or,
Right.
you know, influencers, artists, right? Who can sort of enhance their, who they are by what we offer and bring to the table. And then eventually, our goal is to be able to use, as I mentioned, our audience, or leverage our audience to help bring up the individuals who don't have audience, who are looking for that opportunity.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's going to be our way of kind of passing that down, but we're not at
There
that
yet.
part just yet.
Yeah, not just yet, but
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. So
Yep.
you were able last year. Were able to raise 6 million, which was one of the largest for a black owned founder back in 2022. So why is that so significant? And then what did the funds really help you to do?
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, man, it was just, significant just going through that process and what that was like. I remember, I can't even, I was probably in like close to 100 investor meetings with different VCs all over the world, as we were raising our funding.
Mm,
And, just like, I learned a lot in such a very short period of time in terms of how venture capital works, private equity, raising capital, valuations, all those things. And I realized, like, wow, okay, this is why people go to these like fancy Ivy League schools, because like they might as well be speaking like Russian to me, because
yeah.
for my co-founder Avi, who comes from Wall Street, pedigreed finance background, I mean, this is what he does. He lives and breathes that space the same way that I live and breathe the space of footwear. So he was obviously like a massive um, um, help. And I think coming together and raising that capital, we made a great team. In doing that. So it was significant for me from that perspective, just being an education, man, just like getting exposed to something that not many people of color get exposed to in general. Have an opportunity to sit at the table with some of the
Mm,
people that I was sitting with, and really understanding like what like this type of world of venture capital fundraising actually is and what it's all about. And I'm still learning,
right.
to this day. So that was incredible. And the fact that we were able to raise, the 6 million that we did in a down market. I mean, when you think about, the what last year looked like from, from June on through the end of the year, it was tight. It was very difficult for anyone, to raise money. And for us, to go out and get oversubscribed, our goal was to raise 2 to 3 million, and six, we double that. Um,
Mm, mhm.
and we were very fortunate and blessed to have some incredible investors on board, with us, who came in and who are highly strategic and bring an incredible amount of value. That was one of those things that I learned too as well through that process, is that sometimes not all money is good money. You want to make sure that you take the right money if you have
Mm,
the opportunity to. And we were
right.
very fortunate enough to be able to take the right money and have what we feel like is an incredible roster of investors who have been able to just bring so much value to us. That's to me far exceeded the capital that we raised, just in terms of, you know, um, um, you know, pricelessness, and if that's a word, for the connections and the relationships that have been brought to us. So yeah, so that was it was significant for me from that perspective.
Great, great. And so you did show the Night Runner shoe,
Yep.
um, which someone had asked is the Night Runner's awesome shoe. So it's when I first saw it, it was clear. It kind of looks. It basically looks like a car.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit of the backstory behind the design and how it actually came about.
Yeah, it was I grew up, just like any other kid watching TV. And, I was always more, I always gravitated more to, um, shows that were more, around engineering and design, and, anything that was sort of like fascinating like that, right? Like how things work kind of thing,
Okay.
right? And you know, Knight Rider being like a really popular TV show in the 80s. And still, and I grew up watching the rerun. So like, being inspired by, shows like that and like other like automobiles, like futuristic automobiles that were, coming out, at that time, or even thinking about like car shows and like, how exaggerated like the lines are and, sort of if you just think about like the
Yeah.
80s and like, they would show, oh, this is what the future, this is what, flying cars in 2000
Right.
and, stuff like that. Right. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
so just kind of like reflecting back on that and like wanting to create something that represented that moment for me. And that was where the inspiration came from was from that. So it's really cool to see it actually come through. And some people think it looks like a car. Some say it looks like a boat. I'm just excited by that in general. I don't really care what you think it looks like. Just the fact that like, you can even see that and appreciate that
Right.
is really cool to me. So that's where the concept came from.
Okay. And you were able to, I guess you took that your shoe out to the Super Bowl and all NBA All-Star weekend.
Yeah.
And what was that experience like? And what kind of sort of feedback did you get from, these stars that are kind of used to like just the big brands like Nike and, those things. So
I think the
what did
biggest thing was that it was different, right? It was a
Mm.
it was a breath of fresh air, in the industry. And, now that we don't have any more Yeezy, at least for the, time being, there's a massive hole in the marketplace. And I think there's an appetite out there for things that are new and different. And this represents that. And everything that we're going to be doing forward, represents that. Super Bowl was incredible because it was really the first stage that we got to really display the product on. And shout out to Jalen Ramsey, who's a friend and a client of mine. We've been working on his new football cleat. So another different type of product that we're doing, but we developed some cleats for him last season, and we're working on some new stuff for him to wear this year. And he was kind enough to invite me to one of his events where I was able to show the shoe off to a handful of stars and celebrities who were
Mm,
there. And then he came and supported me at my event that I had along with a handful of other NFL players from James Connors and a few others who were able to come through and support Jonathan Taylor and some of these other people who've been supporter of the brand, myself, and what we're doing. So Super Bowl was incredible, followed up by All-Star Weekend, NBA All-Star Weekend in Salt Lake City. That was also amazing. I would say it was even bigger than Super Bowl in terms of the platform that we had to showcase what we do, not only as a company, but the products that we're going to be showcasing on the market, and made some incredible connections and relationships with NBA players and influencers and movers and shakers and sort of the
right.
sports and entertainment world. So it was great being able to do that. I feel like that really kind of helped set up sort of this momentum that we have going right now as a company. And it's been amazing just seeing all the support and so many people that are excited about the Night Runner. And I hope that they'll be excited about some of these future products that we have coming out very soon as
Right.
well.
And so I did go on your Instagram page and had saw that the night runners were sold out.
Yeah.
So how does actually someone get a hold of the night runner? How do they purchase them?
Yeah, so we operate on a drop strategy. So this is kind of like the new way that
Okay.
that that products are released into the market. In the past, if you wanted to launch a shoe, and this kind of goes back to your other question that you had just about like sort of getting into the space, or at least I was talking about like getting into the footwear space. 10, 20 years ago, if you wanted to start a brand or start a shoe company, you needed to not only you had to create the design, You had to find a factory that was willing to work with you. Then they were probably going to tell you that you had to order some like ridiculous amount of pair of shoes, like 20,000 pairs or 10,000 pairs or 15,000 or more, which for a startup is just not realistic to do that. Then you need to find a buyer for those shoes, and at that time it was just like Foot Locker, Champs, Athlete's Foot, Dick's Sporting Goods, Models if you were in
Right.
the Northeast, right? Like that kind of
Yep.
stuff. You have to find a buyer for those shoes. So there's all these things that would have to line up in order for you to do it. Then at that point, it's like it's wholesale. So you're selling the shoe for actually half of what like what you're going to sell it for, because you got to cut them in at a certain percentage in order for it to work. So you're getting chopped down on your side. So that's just
Right.
wholesale in the way that it works. So you don't end up making as much as you want, because in order to make money, you need to be selling like massive amounts of
Right. Right.
volume
Absolutely.
in order
Yep.
to do that. So what we do now is there's a drop strategy, and what that allows you to do is we release shoes at a very specific time and date, and we were fortunate enough to use our network of friends and people that we have who have been supporting us and wearing our shoes and sharing what their experiences are like with the shoes online. And that's been really just incredible for us, to just see how much love and support we've been getting, and other people see that, and that and it's great that like that message and that's been sort of spread, and people see that. So we release our shoes on a specific day, a specific time. We're going to be doing our next drop very soon. Our first one, like, as you mentioned, did very well. It sold out. We were very excited by that result. I think we proved that you don't have to be this big brand or be working with a big celebrity, or anything like that in order to sell product. I think just through some of the things that we did, and being able to go to All-Star Weekend and Super Bowl and things like that, really was just incredible for us to kind of to have that platform and sort of use that loudspeaker to let people know that we're here and we're doing things that are different, and people showed up and showed out for us, and we appreciate those people. So that's how you get the pairs, right? Like you just sign up with us sign up on Factory Lab, factorylab.com. You put in your email address and you will get notifications to all of our drops, all things factory related that are going to be coming out in the future.
Well, that's great. I'm definitely gonna have to get on, and get one of those night runners,
Yeah.
because I'll be the envy of all my son's
Oh,
friends.
we
So there
got you,
you
man.
go.
We're going to we'll send you a pair. We got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so Omar, this was truly great. I really feel a lot more educated as far as shoes. I mean, I'm a shoe guy, but
Mhm.
and so I'm really glad that you're here today. And hopefully, folks that are watching, we've had a lot of people on today. We've got definitely some comments, and so you know, check your email. You get a whole slew of folks joining. So
I welcome all of it. Please, yeah,
so
follow us.
one of the things is it's a kind of surprise, but I always like to end our show with this question, because as a black man, what you also have a family, you have a wife and a family. We're always pushing to try to do the next thing, or to make sure our families are secure, our friends, loved ones, and some of the times we don't necessarily take care of ourselves. So I always like to ask this question: how are you feeling in the world, as a black man right now?
Um, Good question. Slightly heavy question. Um, I feel good in terms of where I'm at individually. I feel that like a lot of the I've been at this for 21 years, and man, I've lived in my office. I've slept on floors. I've, taken bird baths in bathrooms that don't have showers, if I was even able to do that. I've had quite the journey um along the way to get to where I'm at right now. By no means was it pretty. It was very hard. It was ugly, in some cases, but I think the passion and the love for what I've had, for what I've been doing, and it's all I know, is what got me through, the tough times. So as an individual, I'm very proud of myself that I didn't necessarily break in those moments, because they were there. It happened. There were a lot of moments that could have broken me, and I decided that I made the decision that I wanted to break through those barriers and not allow those, to hold me back. I didn't want to be subjected to what I thought like what other people may think were the cards that were dealt for me. So as an individual, I feel good. I think as a community of Black men, I think there's obviously so much that needs to be done. I don't even know where you start in that. But I think I think through hope and optimism, but I think most importantly, doing the work is how we make, improvements, and how we become better as people. Yes, there are going to be things that are going to be there that are going to hold you back, and or that if you allow them to hold you back, and they're just obstacles, right? Like, what doesn't kill you can make you stronger. And there's truth to that. So I think if, I think just by putting in the work, and just being hyper focused on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and you know hopefully you can help some people along the way in doing
Mhm.
that. I think the future can be bright for all of us collectively. um and not being afraid to ask for help. It's I like, a man's pride is a man's pride at the end of the day, and trust me, I suffer from it too as well. But being vulnerable and being able to ask for help, in those times of need, or just having someone to talk to and share thoughts. My good buddies from college, we've all been very supportive of each other. And I notice, like, as we getting older, we're having conversations with each other that we've never had, before, going back to like our college days. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So, I think the future is bright. I just think, like I said, we have to put the work in. Try not to make any excuses, because trust me, there are a lot of them out there that can be made, and rightfully so. I'm not judging
Mhm.
anybody at all. But I think as a collective, that's what we can, focus on.
Right, right. Well, one of the reasons why I do this show is for individuals like yourself. This is just extraordinary that there is someone that had I don't know, the foresight or the vision, or just through hard work, is changing the game of the shoe industry, and it's a brother. So I'm really appreciative for you coming on today, and I hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. Thank you for having me. And yeah, look forward to doing it again, hopefully.
All right. Thank you.
All right.